She walked in like she'd already been the CEO. No employee badge, no escort, just pristine white sneakers, a fashionably cropped blazer, and a nod from the CEO himself, a man who never spared anyone more than a 2-second glance. I was standing by the elevator, coffee cup in one hand, laptop bag slung across my body, when I heard the words that reset my entire chest cavity. "You're Clara, right? I heard I'm going to be replacing you." I didn't know if the chill that ran down my spine was fear, or the error protocol inside me beginning to boot up. My name is Clara Mayer. For 20 years, I've been the backbone of Arventa Dynamics' entire digital infrastructure. As chief systems architect, I built the foundation that turned a struggling tech startup into a $3.2 billion corporation. The Arventa core system, my creation, my code, my sleepless nights, powers everything from financial institutions to healthcare networks across 37 countries. I've survived 3 CEOs, 2 market crashes, and countless restructuring attempts. Until today, the girl standing before me couldn't have been older than 25. Madison Brentwell. The name meant nothing to me until 2 weeks ago when Oliver Brentwell, our newest CEO, casually mentioned his niece graduated from some tech program at Stanford during an executive dinner I wasn't invited to. Luis Santoro, my deputy architect and closest colleague for 8 years, told me about it afterward. "Just family talk," he'd said with a shrug. Now here she was, looking at me with that particular brand of Gen Z confidence, the kind that comes from never having experienced genuine failure. Her smile wasn't malicious. That's what made it worse. She genuinely believed she deserved to be here. "I'm sorry. Who are you exactly?" I asked, though I already knew. The resemblance to Oliver was unmistakable. Same jawline, same pale blue eyes that seemed to calculate your worth in microseconds. "Madison Brentwell, Uncle Ollie said I should shadow you for a few days before the transition. Something about knowledge transfer, or whatever." She extended her hand, nails perfectly manicured in gradient blue that matched our company logo a little too precisely. "Everyone calls me Maddie." I didn't take her hand. 20 years of system architecture had taught me to recognize anomalies instantly. This was a critical system error in human form. "I'm not aware of any transition," I said evenly, clutching my coffee cup tighter. "And no one shadows me without proper clearance and documentation. So unless you have level 5 security credentials, I suggest you head back to reception." Her smile didn't falter. "Oh, Uncle Ollie said you might not have gotten the memo yet. Let me text him." Before I could respond, the executive elevator doors opened and Oliver himself stepped out, immaculate in his tailored suit. Expression placid as always. The same expression he wore when announcing layoffs or record profits. "Clara, I see you've met Madison." His voice echoed in the marble lobby, drawing glances from passing employees. "I was just coming to find you. Can we chat in my office for a moment?" 20 years of experience told me exactly what was coming, but 20 years of professionalism kept my face neutral as I followed him to the elevator. Madison trailing behind us, her sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. My mind was already racing through system protocols, not the company's, but my own. Every programmer creates backdoors, not for malice, but for emergencies. And I had just identified a critical one. Oliver's office occupied the entire northwest corner of the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city I'd helped build through the digital infrastructure running beneath it. I'd been in this office under 3 different CEOs, each adding their personal touch while the one constant remained. The server room visible through the glass wall behind the desk. My servers, my architecture, my life's work humming efficiently behind temperature-controlled panels. "Coffee," Oliver offered, gesturing to his private barista station. "I have mine. Thanks." I remained standing, though Madison immediately sank into one of the visitor chairs, crossing her legs and typing something on her phone. "Right to business, then." Oliver nodded, seeming to appreciate my directness. He'd been CEO for only 11 months, brought in by the board after our stock took a temporary dip. I'd outlasted executives with twice his experience. "As you know, Arventa is pivoting toward a younger demographic. Our user base is shifting, and we need fresh perspectives to stay competitive. I'd heard this speech before. It usually preceded a department reorganization that changed nothing fundamental but gave the appearance of progress to shareholders. Madison has some fascinating ideas about neural integration and user experience that align perfectly with our 5-year vision. Madison glanced up from her phone, beaming. I've been developing a framework called GenSync that could revolutionize how the Arventa core interfaces with user expectations. It's all about predictive emotional responses. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. GenSync wasn't a framework. It was a barely functional student project that had made rounds in tech blogs 6 months ago. An overhyped concept with minimal practical application. I'd reviewed it myself when Luis brought it to my attention as a curiosity. Oliver, I said carefully, GenSync is theoretical at best. The Arventa core manages critical infrastructure for financial and healthcare systems. It requires stability and security, not experimental interfaces based on the future, Clara. Oliver interrupted, his smile tightening. It's based on the future, which brings me to our meeting tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., full executive board. We'll discuss the transition in detail. What transition exactly? I asked, though I already knew. Oliver glanced at Madison, then back to me. We're creating a new position, Chief Innovation Officer. Madison will take on your current responsibilities while implementing her GenSync vision. You'll be offered a generous separation package, of course. There it was. 20 years ended in 20 seconds. I see. My voice remained level even as I felt something cold and calculating wake up inside me. Not anger, that would come later. This was something more dangerous, absolute clarity. And the Arventa core? The system I personally designed and hold partial patent rights to? A flicker of discomfort crossed Oliver's face. Legal has reviewed all documentation. The company holds full rights to all developed systems. That was his first mistake. I knew every line of every contract I'd ever signed, but I simply nodded. 9 a.m. tomorrow, then. I turned to leave, then paused. Madison, if you're taking over my systems, you should probably know that the Arventa core runs on a proprietary language I developed called ALEC. It stands for Adaptive Logical Execution Code. I'd be happy to provide documentation. Madison's confident smile wavered for just a moment. Oh, I'm sure I can figure it out. Code is code. That was her first mistake. I smiled politely. Of course, good luck. As I walked out, I heard Oliver already explaining something to Madison about office selection. They had already forgotten I was there. Perfect. I returned to my office, a space I'd occupied for 15 years, walls lined with technical awards and framed patents. My team of 17 architects and developers all reported directly to me. They were brilliant, loyal, and completely unaware that by this time tomorrow, I would no longer be their leader. I closed my door, set down my coffee, and opened my laptop. Then I did something I'd never done in 20 years at Arventa. I connected to the Ghost node. Every complex system needs a testing environment, a sandbox where changes can be implemented without affecting the main system. The Arventa core had official testing protocols, of course, documented and monitored. But I had created something else in the early days, a parallel system known only to me. It wasn't malicious, it was practical. When you're building something revolutionary, you need space to experiment without bureaucracy. The Ghost node was my private workshop, invisible to everyone else but with full visibility into the main system. I hadn't accessed it in years, but it was still there, waiting. My fingers flew across the keyboard, checking system status and access protocols. Everything was operational. Then I opened my email and scrolled back through years of correspondence until I found what I was looking for. The Intellectual Property Transfer Agreement for the Arventa core. The document that supposedly signed away my rights to my creation. I'd negotiated hard on that contract, insisting on maintaining partial ownership. Arventa had agreed to my terms on paper. But the final document required signatures from both the company representatives and me. My signature wasn't there. In the chaos of a system launch and company expansion, the final paperwork had never been completed. According to legal documentation, I still owned significant portions of the Arventa Core's intellectual property, a fact I'd honestly forgotten until today's conversation. I leaned back in my chair, a plan forming in my mind. Not revenge, protection. I had built this system to help people, to provide stable digital infrastructure for critical services. If Madison's half-baked GenSync ideas were implemented without proper testing and integration, the results could be catastrophic. I had one night to create a safety net, one night to ensure that my life's work wouldn't be destroyed by nepotism and arrogance. I began to code. The next morning, I arrived at Arventa headquarters at my usual time, 7:30 a.m. The early hour gave me time to think before the chaos of the day began. Today, it gave me time for one final check of my preparations. The executive boardroom was on the top floor, next to Oliver's office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered the same spectacular view, though the long mahogany table and 16 leather chairs made the space feel more formal. When I arrived at 8:55, most seats were already filled. Oliver sat at the head of the table, Madison beside him in what had always been my seat. The board members, mostly venture capitalists and former tech executives, filled the remaining chairs. Luis, my deputy, was standing against the wall with other senior team members. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Clara, thank you for joining us," Oliver said as if I had a choice. "Please, have a seat." The only open chair was at the far end of the table, directly opposite Oliver and Madison, a symbolic distance that wasn't lost on me. I sat down, placing my laptop bag beside me and folding my hands on the table. "As you all know," Oliver began, "Arventa is at a crucial turning point. Our legacy systems have served us well. But to remain competitive in today's market, we need innovation, fresh perspectives." His gaze lingered on Madison, who straightened in her chair. "That's why I've made the decision to restructure our systems architecture department." For the next 20 minutes, I listened as Oliver outlined my professional execution. Madison would take over as Chief Innovation Officer, implementing her GenSync framework directly into the Arventa core. My position was being eliminated in the restructuring. The transition would begin immediately. No one asked about my 20 years of experience. No one questioned whether Madison, fresh from a graduate program with zero corporate experience, could handle the complexities of a system that managed billions of dollars in daily transactions. No one seemed concerned that the Arventa core was written in a proprietary language that only my team and I fully understood. "Clara will receive a generous separation package," Oliver concluded, sliding a folder across the table toward me. "We appreciate her years of service and wish her the best in future endeavors." I opened the folder. Inside was a standard termination agreement, offering 18 months' salary and benefits in exchange for a clean break and full confidentiality. Attached was a separate document, a retroactive intellectual property transfer, assigning all rights to my work to Arventa Dynamics. At the bottom of this second document was a signature, not mine, but Luis Santoro's. As my deputy, he had co-developed several components and was now signing away both our rights. The betrayal stung more than the termination. "If you'll sign where indicated," Oliver said, "HR can begin processing your separation package immediately." The room fell silent, all eyes on me. Madison leaned forward slightly, eager to claim her inheritance. Luis studied the floor, shoulders hunched. I closed the folder without signing. "I'd like to review these documents with my attorney first." Oliver's smile tightened. "Of course, though I should mention that the separation offer is time-sensitive. We'll need your decision by the end of business today." "I understand." I stood, collecting my bag. "I'll also need access to my office to collect my personal items." "Of course, security will escort you." Security? As if I were a threat. After 20 years, I was suddenly a potential liability. "One last thing," I said, pausing at the door. "The Arventa core runs on daily recalibration protocols that only I currently administer. Without them, you may experience system instabilities. Oliver waved dismissively. Luis will handle the transition. Madison will be fully operational within days. I glanced at Luis, who finally met my gaze. The guilt in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. Good luck, then, I said, and walked out. A security guard was already waiting to escort me to my office. Roy had been with the company almost as long as I had. We'd exchanged Christmas cards for 15 years. Sorry about this, Clara, he murmured as we walked. Just following orders. It's not your fault, Roy. I patted his arm. Things change. In my office, I found 3 cardboard boxes already waiting. My personal belongings would fit in 1, maybe 2. 20 years condensed into cardboard. I took my time, methodically removing framed photographs and awards from the walls. While Roy watched from the doorway, I powered up my laptop one last time and performed a few routine tasks. Routine to anyone watching, at least. In reality, I was activating the protocols I'd established the night before. The Cascade Lock protocol was now armed. If anyone attempted to remove my credentials from the system entirely, not just revoke access, but delete my developer signature from the core code, it would trigger a complete system lockdown. Not destruction, just protection. The Arventa core would essentially hibernate, becoming inaccessible until proper restoration protocols were followed. I also downloaded the AIR PDF file I'd created, a comprehensive documentation of the Arventa core's architecture, including all the elements that weren't in the official documentation. It was my insurance policy. Proof that I had created fail-safes to protect the system, not damage it. Finally, I disconnected my laptop from the company network, placed it in my bag, and filled the boxes with my personal items. 20 years packed away in 30 minutes. All set, I told Roy, who nodded sympathetically. I'll help you to your car. As we walked through the open office area, my team watched in confused silence. None of them had been informed of my termination. Madison stood near the elevator with Oliver, already being introduced as their new leader. Clara, Oliver called as I approached. Have you reconsidered the documents? My attorney will contact you, I replied, stepping into the elevator with Roy and my boxes. We'll need your decision by 5, Oliver reminded me as the doors closed. In the parking garage, Roy helped load my boxes into my car. It's not right, he said quietly. What they're doing? No, it's not. I closed the trunk. But it's done. Take care of yourself, Roy. You too, Clara. He hesitated, then added, That Madison girl was asking about server access before you even came down. Seemed in an awful hurry. I nodded. I'm not surprised. As I drove away from Arventa headquarters, I felt strangely calm. The anger would come later. For now, I had work to do. Instead of going home, I drove to a small coffee shop across town, one with reliable Wi-Fi and private corner booths. I ordered a latte, opened my laptop, and connected to the ghost node. Sure enough, Madison was already attempting to access the core system architecture. Her credentials, granted full administrative access, were triggering alerts throughout my invisible monitoring system. She was exploring, mapping, probing the boundaries of her new domain, and making changes. I watched in horrified fascination as she began modifying core security protocols, disabling safeguards I'd implemented years ago. She wasn't doing it maliciously, she simply didn't understand what she was touching. It was like watching someone rewire a nuclear reactor while reading an Electronics for Dummies guide. Each change she made was logged in my ghost node, evidence of reckless tampering that could destabilize the entire system. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Madison opened a new project file and named it GenSync Core. Within this file, she began copying substantial portions of the Arventa core code, my code, and modifying it superficially. Variable names changed, comments removed, but the underlying architecture remained unmistakably mine. She was plagiarizing my work while simultaneously dismantling its safety features. I took screenshots, documenting everything. Then I did something I'd never anticipated doing. I searched for intellectual property attorneys. By 5 o'clock, I had met with Elaine Winters, a specialist in tech IP law, and forwarded her all my documentation. I had not signed Oliver's separation agreement or the IP transfer. Instead, I had Elaine draft a letter asserting my partial ownership of the Arventa core and demanding immediate cessation of any modifications to the system without my approval. They'll fight this, Elaine warned as I signed her retainer agreement. Corporate legal departments don't surrender easily. I know, I replied, but I have truth and code on my side. And a ghost node that might not be entirely legal, she pointed out. It's a development environment I created while building the system. There's nothing in my contract prohibiting it. Elaine smiled. I like your style, Clara. Let's see what they come back with. I didn't have to wait long. At 5:30, I received an email from Arventa's legal department acknowledging receipt of my letter and informing me that all my company access had been formally revoked pending resolution of the dispute. Perfect. Phase 1 complete. That evening, I received an unexpected call from an unlisted number. Clara Mayer, a deep voice asked when I answered. Speaking. My name is Victor Chen. I'm the CTO at Helix Nova. I understand you're suddenly available for new opportunities. Helix Nova was Arventa's largest competitor, a tech giant specializing in the same infrastructure systems, but with a more innovative reputation. While Arventa served established institutions, Helix Nova courted emerging markets and technologies. News travels fast, I remarked. In our industry, lightning speed. Victor chuckled. I've admired your work for years, Clara. The Arventa core is brilliant architecture. We'd be very interested in discussing your future plans, if you're open to conversation. I'm in the middle of a legal situation with Arventa, I said cautiously. We're aware. Our legal team has some thoughts that might interest you. Could we meet tomorrow? Breakfast, perhaps? I considered my options. Working with a competitor would complicate my legal position with Arventa, but it might also strengthen my leverage. Breakfast sounds fine, I agreed. Excellent. The Westside Hotel, 8 a.m. I'll reserve a private dining room. After hanging up, I returned to my laptop and checked the ghost node. Madison had been busy, making increasingly erratic changes to the system. Critical security protocols were being bypassed, redundancies eliminated. She was implementing her GenSync interface directly into the core without proper testing or integration. The system was beginning to show stress fractures. Minor errors were appearing in transactional logs. Nothing catastrophic yet, but concerning. At this rate, major failures would begin within days, possibly hours. I documented everything, forwarding the evidence to Elaine. Then I checked the status of the Cascade Lock protocol. Still armed, waiting. The next morning, I arrived at the Westside Hotel precisely at 8 a.m. A hostess directed me to a private dining room where Victor Chen waited, along with an older woman in a crisp suit. Clara, thank you for coming. Victor stood to shake my hand. This is Marissa Jackson, our chief legal officer. Interesting. They'd brought legal to the first meeting. Please, sit. Victor gestured to the table already set with coffee and breakfast pastries. We have a proposal that might solve all your problems at once. I'm listening, I said, helping myself to coffee. Marissa opened a leather portfolio. We've reviewed the public patent filings for the Arventa core system. Based on our analysis, you do indeed retain significant intellectual property rights, despite Arventa's claims to the contrary. My attorney agrees, I nodded. We'd like to offer you a position as Director of Systems Architecture at Helix Nova, Victor said, leaning forward. Along with founder-level equity in our company, in exchange, we'd provide full legal support in your dispute with Arventa, with the goal of establishing your rightful ownership claims. And once those claims are established, I asked. Marissa smiled. We'd negotiate a licensing agreement between you and Helix Nova for any applicable technologies, completely separate from anything owned by Arventa. You want me to rebuild the Arventa core for Helix Nova, I translated. Not rebuild, Victor corrected. Evolve. Create something new that honors your original vision but pushes beyond current limitations. without corporate restraints holding you back. The offer was tempting, very tempting, but I hadn't survived 20 years in tech by making impulsive decisions. I'll need time to consider this, I said, and to consult with my attorney. Of course. Victor pushed a folder toward me. Here's our formal offer, including compensation details and equity structure. Take all the time you need. As I left the hotel, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Arventa. Dynamics announces revolutionary Gen Sync core platform. I opened the article to find Madison's face smiling beneath the headline, standing beside Oliver at what appeared to be a hastily arranged press conference. Madison Brentwell, Arventa's new Chief Innovation Officer, will unveil the Gen Sync core next week. The article stated, the system promises to revolutionize how institutions interact with digital infrastructure through emotionally responsive algorithms. They were rushing the launch, without proper testing, without understanding the system's architecture. They were pushing forward with a public unveiling of a fundamentally compromised system. I immediately called Elaine. They've announced the Gen Sync core, I told her when she answered. They're claiming it as entirely new architecture. But it's your code, Elaine said. With superficial modifications and critical safeguards removed. This strengthens our case. We'll file for an emergency injunction today. After hanging up, I checked the ghost node again. The system degradation was accelerating. Error logs were multiplying. Madison's modifications had created fundamental instabilities in the core architecture. And then I saw it. A new user account had been created with top-level credentials. The username was MB Creator. Madison was registering herself as the creator of the system. My system? That was when the anger finally came. Not hot and violent, but cold and precise. The kind of anger that clarifies rather than clouds judgment. I had a decision to make. I could let the system fail naturally under Madison's incompetent management, which would damage Arventa but also potentially harm the hospitals, financial institutions, and critical infrastructure that depended on the Arventa core. I could accept Helix Nova's offer, fight the legal battle, and eventually rebuild something better. Or I could take more direct action. I chose option 3. First, I called Victor Chen and accepted his offer, with one condition. I would start immediately, today, with full access to Helix Nova's development environment. Absolutely. Victor agreed without hesitation. I'll send a car for you. Our campus is just outside the city. Next, I called Elaine and updated her on my decision. Accepting employment with a competitor complicates things, she warned. I know, but Arventa is about to implode anyway. I'd rather be positioned for what comes after. What do you mean, implode? Let's just say their Gen Sync launch isn't going to go as planned. I'll explain everything later. Finally, I opened my laptop and connected to the ghost node one last time. The Arventa core was in critical condition now, with cascading errors threatening major systems. Madison's Gen Sync integration was like a cancer, corrupting essential functions. I had one last protocol to implement. The System Restoration Archive was a compressed backup of the original Arventa core, unmodified and secure. I had created it years ago as a last resort recovery option. Now I uploaded it to a secure cloud server and set access parameters that only I could unlock. Then I severed my connection to the ghost node, closing that chapter permanently. 2 hours later, I sat in a spacious office at Helix Nova headquarters, a temporary workspace until something more permanent could be arranged. Victor had introduced me to key team members, all of whom regarded me with a mixture of awe and curiosity. My reputation had preceded me. Make yourself comfortable, Victor said. Our legal team is already drafting cease and desist notices regarding the Gen Sync core announcement. If they've stolen your code, we'll nail them to the wall. Thank you, I replied, setting up my laptop. But I think events will overtake legal proceedings. Victor raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. I'll let you get settled. We have a department meeting at 4 if you'd like to join. I wouldn't miss it, I smiled. After he left, I opened my laptop and checked the news. Arventa's stock had jumped 3% on the GenSync announcement. Madison was being hailed as a tech wunderkind, the face of next-generation innovation. Oliver was praised for his bold leadership in embracing young talent. None of them had any idea what was coming. At precisely 2 p.m., Arventa held their live-streamed tech demonstration of the GenSync core. I watched as Madison, dressed in an Arventa blue blazer, strode confidently onto the stage. Today, we reinvent digital infrastructure, she began, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of TED Talks and startup pitches. The GenSync core represents a fundamental shift in how systems interact with users, anticipating needs through emotional response algorithms. Behind her, a large screen displayed real-time metrics from the Arventa core, my core, now superficially rebranded with Madison's GenSync interface. Let me demonstrate, Madison continued, approaching a console. When a user initiates a transaction, GenSync evaluates not just the data, but the emotional context. She never finished her sentence. As she entered commands, the display behind her flickered. Error messages began to appear. The system metrics fluctuated wildly. Minor technical difficulties. Madison laughed nervously. Let's try again. But the errors multiplied. The display went black, then returned with a cascading series of failure notifications. Madison's expression shifted from confidence to confusion to barely concealed panic. Oliver rushed onto the stage, whispering urgently in her ear. The livestream abruptly cut to a technical difficulties graphic. My phone immediately rang. Luis Santoro. I let it go to voicemail. He called again and again. Finally, I answered, Hello, Luis. Clara. The system is collapsing, he said without preamble, his voice tight with stress. Nothing we do is working. Madison's changes have compromised core functionality. That's unfortunate, I replied calmly. We need your help. Oliver has authorized me to offer your job back, with a significant raise, and I've accepted a position with Helix Nova, I interrupted. As of today. Silence, then. Clara, please, hospitals use our system, financial networks, critical infrastructure. He was right, of course. Innocent people could be affected. That's why I had my failsafe. Check your email. Luis, I've just sent you instructions for implementing the system restoration archive. It will revert the Arventa core to its stable state before Madison's modifications. Thank God, he breathed. I'll implement it immediately. One more thing, I added. The restoration will remove all traces of GenSync and any user accounts created in the last week, including Madison's. The system will revert to its original architecture, my architecture. Oliver won't like that. Oliver's approval isn't required for system restoration. You have administrator access. Use it. Another pause, then. I'm sorry, Clara. For everything, implement the restoration. Luis, we'll discuss the rest another time. I hung up and returned to my laptop, opening the secure cloud server where I'd stored the system restoration archive. Within minutes, I received an access notification. Luis was downloading the archive. I watched as he implemented the restoration protocol. 6 seconds after execution, the Arventa core stabilized. All GenSync elements were removed. Madison's MB Creator account disappeared. My architecture reasserted itself, like a body rejecting a foreign transplant. The system was saved. But Arventa's public embarrassment was complete. Their much-hyped GenSync announcement had imploded live on camera, revealing the hollowness behind their claims of innovation. My phone rang again, Elaine this time. Have you seen the news? She asked when I answered. I have. Arventa's stock is in free fall, down 12% and dropping. The tech blogs are having a field day with the failed demonstration. She paused. Did you know this would happen? Let's just say I wasn't surprised. Clara, her voice turned serious. If there's evidence you deliberately sabotaged their system, I didn't sabotage anything, I corrected her. I built the original system with protection protocols that prevent unauthorized modifications. Madison's changes triggered those protocols. Everything is documented in the system logs and my Air PDF file, which I forwarded to you. Elaine sounded skeptical but intrigued. Well, Arventa's legal department just contacted me. They want to settle immediately. I'm sure they do. I smiled. Tell them I want full acknowledgement of my intellectual property rights and a public statement clarifying my role as the original architect. And compensation? I thought about it. I'm covered there. This is about recognition, not money. By the end of the day, news of the Arventa disaster had spread throughout the tech industry. Madison had disappeared from public view. Oliver was facing harsh questions from the board and shareholders. And Luis had emailed me the full system logs, proving that the failure resulted from Madison's reckless modifications, not any action on my part. Victor found me still in my temporary office at 7 p.m. Eventful first day, he remarked, leaning against the doorframe. Arventa's mess is all over the news. Their stock closed down 22%. I nodded. Unfortunate. Fortunate for us, though. He studied me thoughtfully. You knew this would happen. It wasn't a question. I knew their modifications were destabilizing the system. I acknowledged. I provided a solution before any permanent damage occurred. Elegant. Victor nodded approvingly. You protected your creation without destroying it. That's the kind of thinking we need here. He straightened. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we start building something better. As I drove home that evening, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Satisfaction, certainly. Justice had been served in its way. But also sadness for the system I'd left behind. And for the colleagues who would suffer from leadership's poor decisions. My phone chimed with an email notification. A press release from Arventa Dynamics. Effective immediately. Oliver Brentwell has taken a leave of absence as CEO. Luis Santoro will serve as interim chief executive while the board conducts a leadership search. The company acknowledges system stability issues during today's presentation and assures all clients that the Arventa core is now fully operational under its original architecture. No mention of me. No acknowledgement of my role or rights. That battle would continue through legal channels, but the immediate crisis was over. Another email arrived moments later, this one from Luis directly. They're gone. Oliver resigned rather than face the board. Madison has been removed from all company systems. I've been asked to stabilize things until they find a permanent replacement. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, Clara. But thank you for saving the system. It's your legacy. And I failed to protect it. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I didn't respond. Some betrayals take time to process. Some bridges, once burned, should remain ashes. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my personal notebook, an actual paper journal where I'd sketched early designs for the Arventa core years ago. Those rough diagrams had evolved into a system that now processed trillions of dollars in transactions annually, supported critical healthcare networks, and formed the backbone of infrastructure across continents. Madison had been right about one thing. The system could be better, more responsive, more adaptive, not through superficial, emotionally responsive gimmicks, but through fundamental architectural improvements. I began to sketch again, ideas flowing freely now that I was unburdened by corporate constraints. By midnight, I had the basic framework for something new, something better. The next morning, I arrived at Helix Nova to find a team assembled and waiting. Victor had gathered their best developers, system architects, and UI designers, all eager to work with the legendary Clara Mayer. The floor is yours, Victor said, gesturing to the whiteboard. I looked at the expectant faces, then uncapped a marker and began to draw. The problem with current system architecture, I explained, is that it's built on frameworks designed 15 years ago for technologies that have evolved dramatically since then. Rather than patching and modifying endlessly, we need to rebuild from first principles. For the next 3 hours, I outlined my vision. Not GenSync with its shallow, emotionally responsive gimmicks, but something fundamentally new. a self-healing, adaptive architecture that could evolve with changing technologies while maintaining rock-solid stability. The team asked sharp questions, offered valuable insights, and built on my ideas with their own expertise. This was collaboration as it should be, based on mutual respect and shared vision, not nepotism and hierarchy. By the end of the day, we had a project name, Phoenix Core, risen from the ashes of my previous work, but entirely new. The legal battle with Arventa continued in the background. My attorney, Elaine, negotiated aggressively while I focused on building Phoenix Core. 6 weeks after the GenSync disaster, we reached a settlement. Arventa acknowledged my role as the original architect of their core system, granted me formal recognition of my intellectual property rights, and agreed to a licensing arrangement that would provide royalties for continued use of my code. In exchange, I agreed not to publicly discuss the details of Madison's failed takeover or Oliver's departure. A confidentiality clause that benefited both sides, protecting Arventa's reputation and allowing me to move forward without the weight of past grievances. Luis remained as interim CEO at Arventa, a position that eventually became permanent when the board failed to identify a better candidate. He emailed regularly, keeping me updated on system performance and occasionally asking for advice. I responded professionally but distantly. Trust, once broken, requires more than apologies to rebuild. At Helix Nova, Phoenix Core development progressed rapidly. The team Victor had assembled was exceptional, bringing fresh perspectives while respecting my experience. Within 3 months, we had a working prototype that outperformed the Arventa core in every metric. We should be ready for limited deployment within weeks. I told Victor during our weekly review, the financial module is stable, and healthcare integration is showing promising results. Excellent. Victor nodded, studying the performance charts. The market is ready for something new. Arventa's reputation took a serious hit after the GenSync fiasco. Their stock hasn't recovered. How are we positioning Phoenix? I asked. I don't want this to be about revenge or capitalizing on Arventa's failure. It's not, Victor assured me. It's about evolution. Phoenix represents the next generation of system architecture, designed for emerging technologies rather than patched to accommodate them. He smiled. Though I won't deny the satisfaction of watching Arventa scramble to catch up. The next day, I received an unexpected visitor at my Helix Nova office. Madison Brentwell stood awkwardly in my doorway, looking considerably different from our last encounter. Gone were the pristine sneakers and fashionable blazer, replaced by a simple blouse and slacks. The confidence had been replaced by something approaching humility. Ms. Mayer, may I speak with you for a moment? I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Please. She sat, fidgeting slightly. I owe you an apology. Several, actually. I waited, saying nothing. I didn't understand what I was doing, she continued. I thought system architecture was just another coding challenge, something I could master in weeks because I was special. She shook her head. I was arrogant and entitled, and I damaged something important. Yes, I agreed simply. You did. After Arventa, no tech company would touch me. The GenSync disaster followed me everywhere. She took a deep breath. So I went back to basics. I've been taking actual system architecture courses, studying fundamentals instead of chasing shortcuts. I leaned forward slightly. Why are you telling me this? Because I learned more from failing spectacularly than I ever did from succeeding easily. She met my gaze directly. And because I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did wrong, not just technically, but ethically. What about your uncle? Madison grimaced. Oliver landed at a venture capital firm. He's fine. He always is. She hesitated. I'm not asking for forgiveness or a job or anything like that. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to learn from my mistakes. I studied her for a moment, trying to gauge her sincerity. What are your plans now? I've applied to graduate programs in system architecture, real ones, not accelerated status symbols. She smiled faintly. I figure I've got about 20 years of catching up to do. Despite everything, I found myself respecting her honesty. Start with understanding ALEC, I suggested. The proprietary language I developed for Arventa Core. I've published documentation online recently. It's not as flashy as GenSync, but it's solid. Her eyes widened in surprise at the unexpected guidance. I will. Thank you. After she left, I sat thinking about cycles of creation and destruction, about hubris and humility. Madison had tried to erase me to advance herself. I had erased her work to protect something valuable. The difference wasn't in the action, but in the intention behind it. 6 months after joining Helix Nova, Phoenix Core made its public debut. Unlike Arventa's flashy, ill-fated GenSync presentation, we opted for a gradual, controlled rollout. Select clients in financial services were the first to implement Phoenix, with healthcare networks following a month later. The results exceeded even our optimistic projections. Phoenix was faster, more secure, and more adaptable than any competing system. Trade publications ran features on the revolutionary architecture and the visionary designer behind it. My inbox filled with interview requests and speaking invitations. Victor was ecstatic. This is just the beginning, he told me after our quarterly earnings call, where Phoenix had been credited with a 28% increase in new client acquisition. We're redefining the industry. I smiled but felt strangely detached from the success. Building Phoenix had been challenging and satisfying, but it lacked the personal connection I'd felt with the Arventa Core. That system had been my creation from first principles, built when I was young and hungry and determined to prove myself. Phoenix was better in every measurable way, but it wasn't born from the same fire. What's next? Victor asked, interrupting my thoughts. Integration with emerging quantum computing frameworks. I replied automatically. We'd been discussing this development for weeks. And expanded AI capabilities for the security modules. Victor nodded. Perfect. I'll get the teams aligned. He paused, studying me. Is everything all right, Clara? You seem distant lately. Just thinking about legacy, I admitted, about what we build and what it means. Phoenix is your legacy now, Victor said confidently. It's going to eclipse everything that came before. But that wasn't quite right. Phoenix wasn't my legacy. It was a product, excellent, but ultimately replaceable. The legacy was in the knowledge I'd developed, the principles I'd established, the people I'd mentored along the way. Which gave me an idea. The following week, I proposed a new initiative to Victor, the Helix Academy, an intensive education program for promising system architects. Not a typical corporate training program, but a genuine academic experience with rigorous standards and meaningful projects. We'll identify talent early, I explained. Not just academic stars, but people with genuine aptitude and ethics. We'll give them the foundation I had to develop alone over decades. Victor immediately grasped the potential. Building our own pipeline of Clara Mayers. Building the next generation of system thinkers, I corrected, each with their own perspective and contribution. To my surprise, the first application we received was from Madison Brentwell. Her submission was thorough, honest about her past failures, and demonstrated sincere commitment to learning properly this time. Are you considering it? Victor asked when I showed him her application. I'm not sure yet, I admitted. There's history there. Complicated history. Victor nodded. But sometimes the best students are those who've learned from serious failure. He had a point. Madison had experienced the consequences of arrogance and shortcuts. That lesson, painful as it was, might have prepared her to learn properly now. I decided to interview her personally. Why Helix Academy? I asked when she arrived, dispensing with pleasantries. There are other programs. Because you're here, she answered directly. And because I want to understand systems from the ground up, not just implement trendy interfaces on top of architecture I don't comprehend. The program is rigorous, no shortcuts, no special treatment. That's exactly what I need. She held my gaze steadily. I don't expect you to trust me. I haven't earned that, but I'm asking for the chance to learn properly this time. After careful consideration, I accepted her into the first cohort of 12 students, not out of forgiveness or sentimentality, but because her perspective, including her spectacular failure, would be valuable to the group. Learning required both positive and negative examples. The Helix Academy launched 6 weeks later. I divided my time between Phoenix core development and teaching foundational principles to our students. Madison proved to be diligent and humble, asking thoughtful questions and helping younger classmates grasp difficult concepts. 1 year after the GenSync disaster, Arventa announced a merger with a smaller competitor. Luis Santoro had managed to stabilize the company, but they never regained their market dominance. The press release mentioned combining complementary technologies, but industry insiders recognized it as a graceful exit strategy. Luis emailed me directly after the announcement. "You were right all along. Building something properly takes time and respect for fundamentals. The merger gives our team a soft landing. At least, I hope you're well. Clara, your success at Helix is well-deserved." I finally replied to him, briefly but without hostility. Some bridges could be partially rebuilt, even if they never regained their original strength. Helix Nova continued to expand, with Phoenix Core at the center of its growth. My role evolved from hands-on development to strategic direction and mentorship. The Academy produced its first graduates, all of whom joined either Helix Nova or carefully selected partner companies. Madison completed the program with distinction and accepted a junior architecture position on the Phoenix healthcare team. Her path would be slower than her GenSync shortcut had promised, but it was built on solid ground this time. 18 months after joining Helix Nova, I returned to the former Arventa headquarters building. Helix had acquired it in the merger aftermath, converting it into our expanded research campus. The lobby had been redesigned, with one significant addition: a wall recognizing key innovators in system architecture. My photograph hung in the center, with a simple silver inscription: Clara Mayer, creator of systems and futures. As I stood looking at it, Madison appeared beside me, returning from lunch. "Accurate," she commented, nodding toward the inscription. "We'll see," I replied. "The future isn't created yet." "But the systems that will build it are," she said. That's what I finally understand now. We're not just writing code or designing architecture, we're creating the foundations that everything else will be built upon. I glanced at her, surprised by the insight. "Exactly." Madison smiled tentatively. "I have some ideas for the quantum integration project. If you have time later, I'd appreciate your feedback." "Come by my office at 4, I agreed. As she walked away, I looked again at the silver inscription: Creator of Systems and Futures. The words captured something essential about my journey, not just the code I'd written or the architecture I'd designed, but the approach to building things that lasted. The Arventa Core had been my first masterpiece, a system that had survived 20 years of technological evolution because it was built on sound principles. Its near destruction had taught important lessons to everyone involved, about shortcuts, about respect for fundamentals, about the difference between innovation and destruction. Phoenix would be better still, not because it erased what came before, but because it built upon that foundation with wisdom gained through experience, both triumphant and painful. I turned away from the wall and headed toward my office. There was work to do, systems to build, futures to create. The past had provided its lessons. Now it was time to apply them. In the elevator, my phone chimed with a message from Victor. "Board-approved global expansion of Phoenix Core. Implementation begins next month. Your legacy grows." I smiled as I composed my reply. Not legacy, foundation. The difference mattered. Legacy suggested an ending, something left behind. Foundation implied continuing growth, structures yet to be built, possibilities still emerging. When Madison arrived at 4 o'clock, plans for quantum integration in hand, I saw the same distinction reflected in her approach, no longer seeking to replace or erase, but to build upon, to extend, to improve. "Let's see what you've got," I said, clearing space on my desk. As we reviewed her designs, I recognized elements of my own architectural philosophy merged with fresh perspectives. The student hadn't become the master, but she was becoming a genuine collaborator, adding value rather than merely claiming credit. That evening, as I drove home from the office, I passed the coffee shop where I'd sat a year and a half earlier, watching Madison dismantle my life's work through the ghost node. I felt a momentary echo of that cold anger, then let it fade. The system I'd protected through those 6 seconds of code execution had evolved into something stronger. The career that had seemed finished had transformed into something more meaningful. Even Madison, who had walked in with such entitled confidence that first day, had found a better path through failure. Systems, like people, were defined not just by their original architecture, but by how they adapted to threats, recovered from failures, and evolved to meet new challenges. I pulled into my driveway, thinking about tomorrow's academy lecture on adaptive architecture. The central principle I planned to emphasize wasn't about code or protocols or security features, but about purpose. Systems existed to serve human needs, to solve real problems, to create genuine value. That purpose had guided me when I built the Arventa core, when I protected it from reckless modification, and when I designed Phoenix to surpass it. It would guide the next generation of architects, including a humbled Madison, as they built systems I couldn't yet imagine. Creation, protection, evolution. The cycle continued, each phase necessary, none sufficient alone. 6 seconds of code had erased a $970 million server. But the principles that server embodied had endured, stronger for having been tested. My name on the wall downstairs wasn't the end of a story, but a marker in an ongoing narrative of building, breaking, and building again, better each time. Creator of systems and futures. The description was aspirational, a reminder of responsibility rather than a claim of accomplishment. The true test would come in what those systems enabled, what those futures held. I smiled as I unlocked my front door. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new ideas, new opportunities to build something lasting. That was legacy enough.